Very stable delivery. Go. Hard song. Okay. Ishbahan. She's up the guy. Yeah. Oh. Well, a gun. One of Miyashi's drawings.
Eonia. Wangi de atite. Utam. I always start by apologizing for my nervousness and for speaking in front of all of my elders. And I apologize for any mistakes that I make or may have made. Ijaje Witake Barbara Salvatore, Indadi Ijaje Witake William Salvatore, Idenge. Inaha Ijaje Witake Christine Barba Brown. I am Italian, French, German, Portuguese, and my great-grandmother was Mi'kmaq. Omaha Maji, Ponca Maji. I am not Omaha, I am not Ponca. I come from the Eastern Door as a dreamer, storyteller, and artist. On November 13th, 1995, I had a dream that I was riding a big black horse covered in seed sacks and parfleches, and I was covered with seed sacks, pouches, and bags from my neck to my hips. Riding across the tall grass prairie, trailing over pine ridges to a flat hilltop. A valley spanned out below. And there was a woman in a faded blue dress, planting seeds in circle patterns around her. And behind her were abandoned earth mounds. On the ground, there she was. And just as she turned her head to look at me, a dog barked and I woke up. I wanted to know why she saved the seeds, where she was going, how she named the plants, the places and the people. I did not know then that I would follow this dream for years and that Big Horse Woman and Maggie would lead me to their whole story and to Nebraska. I want to thank all the Ponca and Omaha people who welcomed me, taught me, and allowed me to find my path and purpose to be a seed keeper and seed saver of the plants and of the words. The words are seeds too. I want to especially acknowledge Dr. Mark Aukuni Swetland Idinge, whose language class at University of Nebraska-Lincoln laid the foundation of my understanding of the language and led me to being able to teach the Ponca language for 2 years to the children in Nebraska. It was a dream job, which I never would have imagined. I also want to acknowledge Emmeline Sanchez Walker Idenge, who was one of our elder speakers in class and who is deeply missed. Weebdahan to Arlene Walker, Dolores Black, Vida Stabler, Pat Phillips, Brian James Gordon, Henry Lee, Louis Hedman, Dwight Howe, Randy Ross, the Sanssouci family, and the Papan family, who've helped me and so many others on their language journeys. And to all of you that participate in these gatherings of language speakers, teachers, and learners, I thank you. So today I'm happy to share a little bit about the plants I've come to know and love, and to share their names and how they help us. This is the part where I stop being nervous because I'm not talking about myself, but about something I love. So I chose this as the first plant, Bebon, because I'm going to show you an example of how it grows in the east and what Maggie would have harvested and how it grows here and what the Ponca and Omaha tribe would have harvested. And I'm also really happy because every time I speak about the plants with tribal members, they add to the knowledge. There's very little in anthropological books or that have been spelled out, and even though years of searching, every time I speak to tribal members, I learn the current name for plants and more about how they're used. So raise your hand and correct me if you have something to add, because it really needs to be part of what we pass on. So bee balm is known as Peje Paminka, or Peje Pa, but at the Omaha language class last month, I was corrected, and most Omaha and Ponca currently call it Nubdong, which means sweet smelling, smells good. It's also one of the family of plants that's called Mamkonskide, a sweet medicine, which was also used for white prairie clover, hops, and blue flag. So how many of you have used Nubthong to make your regalia smell good, or make you smell good as you dance by the women, or used it? In the East Coast, our tribes would use it as something to carry at funerals to help the spirit with the sweetness of that plant, and it was often buried with our relatives. This is the East Coast version. They call it Oswego tea, and it grows bright red. And here in Nebraska, or up in Nebraska, this is how it grows, a beautiful lilac color, sometimes pink. This is in my garden. My neighbors are not so friendly with me because my garden is what they call weeds. I have milkweed that's 7 feet tall, and sunflowers that are 10 feet tall, and carpets of clover. And once they learn how those plants can be used, they're a little kinder to me. This is in a ditch on the way to the farm where I keep my horses, and this is where your Nubthon came from, Dwight. And this is after it's been a little bit past prime. It's starting to curl, so this was my last harvest last fall. And then I also encourage people to learn the winter silhouette of a plant. Bee balm in the winter looks like this. So if you see those seed heads, you might want to grab some and shake them around where you want them to grow next year, or even just, use as perfume in your home or your closet. Bloodroot, Minigate Makawa, woman seeking medicine. So this had a lot of magical and spiritual powers. The root, when you cut it open, it literally bleeds a bright red around the pores of its skin. And I just love the way this plant comes in the spring under the winter litter of leaf, and it protects itself so well. You see how it grows with the palmate leaf just surrounding it and holding it? It's so fragile, and yet takes such good care of itself. And then the flower comes up in all its beauty. And this is an example of, if you want to learn a plant, search its image, go bloodroot image, and then you can get all the pictures, because it's very hard to learn a plant through just 1 or 2 pictures.
Do they have, that has a medicinal use?
Bloodroot medicinally,
What do the Omahas and Poncas use it for?
a lot of tribes, including the Omaha and Ponca, would use it for infections, for toothaches, for mouthwashes, and then spiritually, I've only know what I've read in the books, that it was used as a paint to attract the female, or in war. Blue vervain, Verbena hastata, and I always put the scientific name, though for me, that's often confusing. It's another way to search a plant. If someone calls this blue vervain, someone else might have a folk name for it that's different. But if you look up the Latin name, you will find that exact species of plant. So there are many vervains. Peje Mamkom, herb, it's medicine-making herb. And maybe they use that broad term because vervain is good for so many things. And here's a field of it right now. It especially takes over old cornfields. But right now, driving through Nebraska, you just see fields of this purple blue. In my bouquet, when I was riding horses at the Amish farm where I keep them, the children trailed behind us and picked me a bouquet to bring with me. And then they also stuck the plants in my horses' bridles. And so we rode around with horse masks of sage and vervain that day. It was a beautiful experience. So this is the hoary vervain. And the flower will sprout up the stem. It'll start at the bottom and keep going towards the top. So the flowering lasts a long time. And I had another species of vervain that grows on the East Coast more, but I guess I lost that picture. Blue cohosh, ju nakata tonga makong. Ju flesh nakata hot, tonga, great, makong, medicine. Literally meaning hot flesh, the Omaha word for fever, great fever medicine. And I know I have friends who have used this for fever and it's been very effective. It's also very popular as a hormonal stabilizer for women. And the medicine is usually made with the root. And it used to grow on my farm on the East Coast as well. Oh, here's the other version of blue vervain. It reminds me of like a candelabra. It's, I tell people blue vervain for nerve pain. It's a nervine, a nerve tonic. When I was run over, my pelvis was crushed. I couldn't walk for 6 months. I still had a lot of pain, and I use this. It helps with sciatic pain. It helps with toothaches. It helps with, you know, if you get joint pain in your hands. This is a good medicine for that.
You make like a tea?
There are, I call it 5-finger medicines. There are basically 5 ways to make medicine. The first is with spit. You'll take plantain, which we'll see a picture of, and make a poultice with spit, water, then using oils to make a poultice or lotion. And a tincture is made with vodka, usually 100 proof vodka. For people who don't take to vodka, you can put that medicine in tea and the alcohol will evaporate out and you'll still have some influence from the medicine. And the third is like honey, the fifth is like a honey or syrup. So that's how I teach kids to remember the different ways to make them. So usually a tea is something that's weak. You put the bag in and all the medicine goes off in the steam. So what they call, herbalists call it an infusion. You boil it hard, covered, and then you let it simmer for 5, 10, 20 minutes, depending on the thickness of your plant. And then you take that, pour it in a jar, a mason jar, and you cover it. And the plants continue to infuse in the water. And you can leave it overnight on the stove. You don't have to refrigerate it right away, refrigerate the next day, depending on the strength of the plant and how fast it deteriorates. It can last up to a month for some plants like ginger root, and most will last a week or so at least. So that medicine stays in the water. You could strain out the plant later. You can use it on mosquito bites, but we're going to come to the best plants for that in a minute. Yeah, you can chew those leaves, but they're really bitter tasting, so it doesn't make the best spittle poultice, but it will numb the pain a little bit. Also, vervain and bee balm, that first one is used, called snake root, because they're used for poisonous toxic bites. And one time I was at a concert, an outdoor concert, and there was a dog leaping through a bee balm field with its foot wrapped. And it was so joyous, and it was like in the right place at the right time. I asked its owner, why is its foot wrapped? And it said it had been bitten by a rattlesnake 2 days prior. So like the dog knew to run through the bee balm. I thought that was a really good demonstration of animal knowledge of their relation to the plant. And this blue vervain is beautiful. It reminds me of like a candelabra growing. Cattail, wahab igasconde. Wahaba, corn, igasconde, similar or like. So it refers to that floral spike coming to maturity at the same time as the corn. This is another plant I love that is so beautiful, and my friend Michelle said I could use this picture from a class she taught at the Winnebago tribe where she used it for weaving. In the handout, there's a paragraph at least of each plant and their use, if you want to know more. And if someone doesn't get the handout, please come up to me and I'll make sure that I email or send you a PDF through Facebook Messenger. cedar, maji, or masihi. And there's flat and curly cedar. There are different kinds. But I have some of this in my box to offer to people that I harvested from the back of my horse just the other day, if anybody wants a sprig of cedar. And it's very good for lymphatic conditions, for swelling legs, for, you know, if you have lymphedema. And it's good for so many things. My horses, when you were talking about insect repellent or mosquito bites, my horses taught me this. When we're riding the trail, they will plunge their heads into a cedar bush. And, I do my best not to get scraped off, but I learned that they do that because it repels mosquitoes and flies, and it's instantaneous. So once they do it, I'll take a twig and rub it on my own arms and neck. It helps a lot during the ride. And this is a case where you can make an oil to rub on. Chokecherry, non bajinga, little cherry. And it blossoms a lot along the creeks near where I live. It's a beautiful smelling plant, and the cherries are tiny. One way to know it's chokecherry is the bark has like a pimply, dimply bark that lets you know it's cherry. And the same is true of elderberry. It has that pimpling on the bark. And I had my first experience of making wojapi, but I used plums. But when they make it with the cherry, they keep the pit. And a lot of people say, well, the pit has cyanide, you'll get poisoned. But the rule is, if you're eating apples or cherries or anything with cyanide seeds in them, if you eat as much commensurate to the, like if you eat the whole apple, all the things in that apple will protect you from the cyanide. If you're making wajapi and you include those pits, all the qualities of the toxins being removed are in the cherry fruit. So it's okay. It has to be smashed, yes. Thank you. So that took a lot of effort with the mortar and pestle in the past. Coneflower, mikahi, cone, mika, plant, he, also called ikigahai, to comb, also called inchtangatehi, when used as an eye wash. And I broke this down because inchta, eye, tonga, big, te, buffalo, he, plant. So I wondered if it also meant that you could find it at the time when the buffalo were around, because like right now it's flowering in Nebraska, and I know the buffalo are out at pasture and easy to find on the Ponca reservation, and not reservation, the Ponca powwow grounds and the Santee reservation, but I wonder if in the past the buffalo were a clue that that medicine was up. And in the handout there's a page about that, that my curiosity with the language, I'm not linguistically trained or academically trained, and you know, I come to as many classes and try to learn as many ways as I can, but sometimes I will try to break down that word to see what the different parts mean. And I raise some questions about the meaning of nettles and, you know, how different words are used. So if anybody has something to contribute to that, I would really appreciate that. This is like a cultivated echinacea, and people have been breeding it so it's brighter and pinker. But I love the ones that I come across on my trips and while riding, and they're pale and they droop, and you know, they just look like a bunch of people coming home from the ball that have had a wonderful night. And I don't know, every plant has such personality to me, and I try to remember them in different ways. And I just love that field, echinacea in the field like that. And here's another one. This is in Kansas.
Is that like snake root?
Yes, it is a very strong snake root. And the root is also used as one of my favorite external antibiotics and wound medicines. And it's really good for toothaches, for sore throats. Whenever my children had strep throat going through the school system, I would give them echinacea way back in the back of their throats before and after school. And My children rarely ever got strep throat. It's one of the best medicines for that. And, you know, at the first sign of a cold, runny nose, I would take, you know, a few droppers every day, and I rarely get as sick as other members of the community. However, don't take it long term. Take it for 7 to 14 days, and then stop. Otherwise, it affects your white blood cell count. So that's something people think it's like a daily supplement. That's not a good idea.
It'll numb your mouth.
Yes, and that you know you have a good tincture and a good medicine when you put it on your tongue for a toothache. My husband avoided going to the dentist for a wisdom tooth for 3 months. By every time that pain cropped up, he put it on that. And finally, he had to get a root canal. But it's very good for tooth pain. It makes it so you can sleep at night. And it's very good for open wounds. And as you said, snake bites. This is a new friend I met, a cottonwood tree. I just love the spirit of these trees. I could sit with them all day. Ma Jean, Ma Snow Jean, a tree or wood. It's literally means like cotton tree. But I wonder, you know, maybe the tribes in Nebraska weren't exposed to cotton before the 1700s or 1600s, so maybe they never saw a cotton wool. Maybe that has to do more with snow tree. So, you know, that's something to think about as far as how it's translated. Another name that elder at the last Omaha Ponca Language Institute at NICC and Macy told me that they also were called Jawan Henanjin, standing ghosts. And I would often think about cottonwood and sycamore trees the same way. Sycamore with their white fingers reaching up to the sky, the cottonwood. Botanical drawings can often help because they separate the parts of the tree for you to understand. And also, as far as oils and salves, a very strong medicine is made from those buds when they're really sticky and young. And the sound of the rattling leaves, of course, means so much to us at ceremony. It warns us of rain, and I don't know, there's been so many times when I'm in the circle where it's like the trees are dancing with us. And I just love the sound of those rattling leaves. And here's another picture of that vervain in the foreground and an old cottonwood falling down behind it. Here's those sticky buds you can make medicine with. And the cotton coming up. Elderberry, Wagadahashka, or Wagadahashka, Wagadahashki, elder bush. The Latin term sambucus you'll see in health food stores or other stores. A lot of cough medicines named sambucus. It's also famous for a liquor flavor. But that's a good ingredient in cough medicines and another one of those very strong antivirals to take when you're coming down with a cold or sore throat. And my Ponca Omaha friend Diana Valier, I taught her about this plant and she gifted me with a mason jar full of the syrup, and I'm on my 4th year of winters where I take a spoonful of it when I feel something coming down, and I haven't been sick in a long time. Between the echinacea, elderberry syrup, and other teas that I make, it's a really good way to avoid being sick rather than waiting till you're sick. You have something?
Yeah, my grandchildren have the flu and I was keeping them, so I took them to the doctor. And their doctor said for me to take elderberries to prevent getting the flu. And I have a really low,
Her grandchildren had the flu and they were getting sick, and her doctor told her to give them elderberry.
and for me to take elderberries, so I didn't catch the flu. And I took it and I didn't catch it. I have a really low immune system, so it worked.
And he recommended she take it too so she wouldn't catch it, and her immune system is really low, and it worked. She did not get sick. Yes. Good for you. And I'm really glad to hear that doctors are encouraging these medicines too. And they call them alternative medicines, and I'm like, no. The reason I started studying plants is because I wanted to know what all of our aunties, grandmas, and relatives used to use. Why have we forgotten? So yeah,
You have a picture of that?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Show us a picture.
This is the green fruit. The white flower is so beautiful and delicate, like lace. I just love the
Elderberry.
flower. The berry, I did not get a picture of it. I wanted to take a picture of my own, you know, a bush that I was following in time, but I didn't get the berry. But the berries, when they come, like they're a round, like umbrella shape, and the cluster is beautiful, and they're bright, bright purple, and you have to get them before the birds do. And the Victorian ladies used to use this flower as a wash for pure, beautiful skin, and it makes your skin really nice and soft. Goldenrod, jasagezi, or jasagazi. Ja, weed, sage, hard, z, yellow, hard yellow weed. And I don't know why they call it hard, but I do know the stems are quite hard, and when harvesting, you often need scissors. They don't break and snip off like others. But this plant I encourage in my yard as well as the milkweed. It's the Nebraska state flower, but it's also one of the best medicinal plants for fevers, for allergies, for rashes, for it also encourages good skin, helps with acne, and it's one of the best pollinator plants that they have on their way, their migrating journey. It's one of the last plants that they can drink from. And this shows how the monarch have a relationship with them as well. Milkweed, bitterroot, wachtha, or wachtha, which also translates to flower, or the Omaha would use it for cabbage, because the cabbage reminded them of the milkweed pods. And this is the early flowering phase. These are the ones in my yard. You see my car in the background? So I have a jungle of milkweed. Last year it was these 13 plants. This year I have 77 plants. Yeah. So my theory of lawn mowing is to wait until it goes to seed, and then to harvest it when the seed is ripe. I use pillowcases often, or big sheets, so I'm not scattering an overly abundant amount in my neighbor's yards. But I will wait until that time, because to me the seed is the most concentrated form of the medicine, and it's the future. And all of these plants that people have tried to eradicate for decades, it's my purpose in life to keep them alive. And this photo is from Taylor Keene, Omaha and Cherokee. He gave me permission to use this. He collected these for a Omaha soup feast that he was making. And as you can see, the soup, you use the tight green flower buds. He's also using the leaf, which I've never eaten.
It's important too when we talk about the plants to know how to use them and
Yes.
not just allow to use them.
Right.
Because if someone was boiled this one time and makes soup, they're
Right.
going to get sick because it's poisonous.
Yeah.
That's why the oil is done all the time. So
Oh.
I just want to put that out there
Yeah.
so people just don't go try to do it.
Yeah, and I was gonna say that before moving to the next one, because I was afraid to try it because of all the warnings of the sap and the toxicity of the milkweed, which is very true. And I was taught to boil and dump 3 times, but Marissa is saying their tradition is to boil and dump 4 times. So I did mine 3 times and I didn't get sick, but next time I will do it 4 times. And I haven't tried the pod yet. Do you boil the pod when the young pod comes, the seed
Yeah,
pod?
you don't pick once it's purple, it's not good for something. So
Right.
it's when it's really.
Right. And
The pod is called
tashe. And Eugene Papin taught me that word at our last conference, that it meant little flower buds, tashe. So he said, wache tashe. Is that how you say it? Wacha. Tashe. Okay. And again, does anybody have any experience of eating the green pods? Yeah. Do you have a question? Yeah?
No, I just had a comment that, since I was having a walk, every summer we would go out with kids.
Yeah.
We soak them overnight.
Yeah.
And then we clean them at 3 or 4 times. We don't boil them, we clean them. We have to dump it out, dump the water, just 3 or 4 times to make sure everything's off. And then you can cook.
Yeah.
that's how-
So
that's how-
she's the second one who's saying don't use any part of the plant that shows any pink or purple. It's got to be green. And she's also adding that it's not just the boiling, that they soak overnight and rinse several times before the boiling process. Is that
A lot
correct?
of times that's just hand going over every leaf that you pick up.
Yeah.
Make sure it's-
Making sure the caterpillars are safe.
Spiders
The
are
aphids are gone.
But it's really good.
That's exactly the kind of feedback that I love. Thank you so much. Morel Mushroom, I want to thank Andre Sanssouci for one of these slides. Is a screenshot from a video that he did. And this is one of the difficult words for me to pronounce, but I'm going to try. Te niha ukleji, or te niho ukleji. Can you say it? Do you mind saying it? Te niho ukleji. Buffalo, stomach, spotted or striped ukleji. Does that refer to spotted or striped, like the honeycomb pattern? Yeah, tripe. I've also seen it referred to as Mikaeli, like a sore star, but I don't really understand. Oh, the birch trees standing there. She also referred to as wanoche, like ghosts. Yep. Thank you. Your mother referred to them that way? Your mother referred to them that way? Her grandparents told her that. Wanoche, the birch. So this is the white birch bark, yep. These are some fresh morels growing. I actually found these on the farm again. And the Amish are very, very fond of these as well, and they will pick them by the pound and keep secret where they found them, but they share them with me. And this is their biggest mushroom. I put it next to the matchbook for comparison of size, so we celebrated this one. And this is the slide that Dre on Facebook had a little video of this. Peini, ni kukdeje, long idade. That's not part of the name, that's part of your phrase? Okay. And this is a picture of tripe. And you can see the resemblance, eh? I didn't know what tripe meant until I learned about this mushroom. Do people eat tripe? Okay. That was tasting good, huh? Okay. I have to get brave. I want to thank Marissa for giving me permission to use this. This is an actual buffalo stomach in her hands. Puffballs, mikayakli, or hokshi chekpa, is the Dakota word meaning baby navel, and I included that because it's often used as an antibiotic, antiseptic at birth to cover the baby's navel. And I used it with my own children. I would harvest the puffball. When we were little, you know, you'd see them at the stage like this, and you'd kick them, and the powder would go everywhere. That was big fun. And we didn't realize we were helping to spread the spores and spread that medicine all through the field. But if you take it home and you don't eat it, I mean, it's a wonderful food. I will just take it and grill it with butter and garlic salt or oil, olive oil. It's just so good. It's creamy like cream cheese, has a nice mild taste. You can kind of add it to anything, but as a singular food, it's incredibly delicious. But if you, beyond this powder stage, if you come across a puffball that you slice open and it's black inside, that's a false puffball. That's a liar. That is poison. Don't listen to that puffball. Don't harvest it, and don't kick its spores around. mullein, but also about the puffball, it's also a really good, I always have a little lunch bag full of that powdered fungus, powdered spore, because it's very good on fungus and skin rashes, for diaper rashes, for soothing wounds, and just a good first aid thing to have around. Sinihi mullein, footsore plant. This plant I love. It always seems like it's dreaming. The first year it just grows as like a pillow on the ground with this rosette of soft, beautiful leaves. And I think they called it footsore plant because it's very common in many cultures to tuck a leaf of this plant in your moccasin, boot, or shoe to help a weary traveler. And it's not just because it's soft padding, but because it has medicinal qualities that help with sore muscles, with healing bones. The taproot of the mullein plant is very good for healing bones, and I harvested it for that reason once, and I didn't harvest it fresh. I regretted it because as a dry root, I took a sledgehammer to it, I took a hammer to it, I took a saw to it, and I could not break that root. And it just gave me an idea of how strong it might make your bones. It looked like a long white bone. So if you ever harvest the root for bone medicine for broken bones, harvest it and chop it up while it's fresh. But this is the first year. It's like a pillow dreaming inside. And second year, it comes up with this long spike, and the bumblebees and insects again. It's a beautiful pollinator plant. And here's a whole grove of it. And again, in Nebraska, in the cornfields and around the edges and ditches, it will look like soldiers tramping down the road. And these flowers can be picked and put straight into a jar of olive oil and then strained off after a week or so, and they make the best earache medicine. I had so much success with my own children with this, where the first sign of an earache, it's such a tendency to bring our children to the doctors because they scream in such pain with earaches. And I would make the mullein oil and always keep some fresh in the refrigerator. And in the refrigerator, it would last for 6 months or so. And just a few drops of it, you warm it in a cup of hot water, you put the jar in the cup of hot water so it doesn't go into the ear cold. And just a couple of drops of that warm oil, or if you have an infant that is shy about things in the ear, you can even just rub it around their ear and inside their ear with your finger, and their earaches would never develop into the need to go to the doctor. And also those leaves are a signal that they're good for your lungs. They're often included in smoke mixes, kinnikinnicks, and they're really good for respiration, for clearing the lungs, for coughs. Lamb's quarters, I don't have Omaha or Ponca name for it. If anyone of you have used this plant and have a name for it, I would appreciate you teaching me that. But this is one of our richest greens with vitamins and minerals. It's like just natural spinach that's everywhere, and again, something I like grow in my yard until it goes to seed. One clue is that the new growth has silvery leaves on the top. If you eat it raw, it's very much like spinach. Here are the seeds in an early phase. They're kind of white, gray. I made a pesto with it. Here's the recipe picture, and here's my version, but it was delicious. And these are the seeds later in the season when they turn brown, reddish. And this is the time where I would harvest it, shake out those seeds. They were really good to feed to animals as well, anything that eats grains. It's like our North American amaranth. They are related. Nettles, hanugahi. And this was one where the breakdown, ha, skin, hide, I don't know why I have hide in there. Oh, hide. Ha, skin or hide. Nuga, male, as applied to animals or birds, not human. He, stalk, stem, trunk of a plant, tree, or vine. Or it was also called manaji hahi, hair of the sun or moon. So again, why the ancestors would relate it to the sun or the moon. How can we tell why it got that name? If anybody has stories. And also, it was used to make a lot of rope and netting. And I know that syllable ga is also used when you're pressing anything or pulling anything like through the teeth. I wonder if that has any relation to making rope and pulling the stem through the teeth. Has anybody known anyone who's made nettle rope for fibers? So many of these things I would love to learn how to do. And of course, nettles is called stinging nettles because of the hairs. As you walk through it or brush against it, it raises an immediate rash and welts. And here, I love the silhouette of it here growing in the woods. It kind of warns you from a distance that it's there. And here, there's actually several different kinds. So again, botanical drawings can help you to recognize different kinds. But here's a close-up of those stinging stems. And even so, when you learn the plant and you have a relationship with the plant, there are ways that you can pick it by pinching from the bottom up, turning upside down into your bag or pillowcase, and it doesn't really sting you because you're going against the hairs instead of brushing them against you. Here's another close-up of the stem. And as much as they are stinging and so many people think they're vain, they have the highest content of minerals and vitamins in a green plant on our continent. I have many herbalist friends who say, when in doubt, use nettles. It's just a good nutritious herb. It's good as a daily fortifier. You can use it cooking, like any of the spinach or greens you put in recipes. I've used it in pastas. I've made pestos with it. You can use it in casseroles, add it to soups. And just as a green itself, you can cook it up and use it as a side dish. And once it's cooked, those hairs melt away. They're not harmful to your mouth. And here's an example of nettle string or fiber. And as far as getting stung by nettles, there are often neighboring plants that will help you to stop that sting. And again, going back to your question, Mark, for bug bites and mosquitoes, this is the plant to use, plantain, and it grows everywhere around us. There's two different kinds, Plantago major and Lance. This is, the major is the one with the round palmate leaves and the long seed stem in the middle. Here it is before seeding. This little weed is one of the most useful medicines on the planet. It's so famous, it's become a Facebook meme. And this is the lance leaf, which I find more common on the East Coast, and my children would take this seed head and make fairy wands out of it and go blessing each other and making wishes, and I encouraged them because they were spreading the seed. And they also called it the Band-Aid plant because they learned to pull one leaf of that and wrap it around a bleeding finger or a wound would stop the bleeding immediately. And that even works if you don't chew it up, but I encourage, that's one of the first spittle poultices that I teach. If you chew it up, put it on a bug bite. I was on another occasion at a baseball game where kids got into a hive of ground bees, and many of them got stung, and a friend and I went around chewing up plantain and spitting it on the kids, and some others were repulsed. But those kids' stings went down, and they didn't have adverse effects, and they all learned how to chew plantain and put it on a bug bite after that. Yeah, and if you don't want to chew it, you can also crush it with your fingers and apply it. But there are actually enzymes in our mouths that mix really well with the medicine of plantain that make a perfect solution. The lance leaf, here's a botanical drawing of it with the little fairy wand seed heads. And this is another one where, they start flowering at the bottom and spiral their way up. So when you find those flowers at the tip, you know that that seed pod is almost ready to harvest. And all of these plantains, if you can't get that plant in the winter, just collect the seed when it starts to brown. Give yourself a little bag of it in your first aid cabinet, because that can be made into a tea poultice, and that has as strong or stronger medicinal qualities. It also helps with constipation, intestinal dysfunction, hemorrhoids, stomach aches, plantain, nettles, and a couple of the others like vervain that I mentioned. The more you read, the more or experience the plant, or hear about it, the more you'll know it's useful for so many things. Sage peje hota. gray herb, or Peje Hotajinga, little gray herb, or Peje Hude. That came from Elizabeth Staler and Mark Cooney's research in their first dictionary. And Eugene Papin taught me Imbe Hude, Imbe leaf, Hude gray leaf. This is a culinary sage. It's not the one that we're talking about. The one we're talking about in California and on the West Coast grows this white sage that's used in ceremony and medicine. And here, this is from South Dakota. And here is some sage that grows in Nebraska. And here's some sage on the farm. This is a sage brush. And then these are the 3 sacred medicines, cedar, sage, and sweetgrass that I harvested for ceremony last year. And again, sage is another plant that you all know more about the use of it probably than I do. But from this bouquet, if anybody would like a sample of Nebraska sage to bring home, you can have some of that too. Sumac. There are 2 kinds, smooth and staghorn. I'm really familiar with the staghorn. We used to make a lemonade for the kids called Sumac Aid, loaded in vitamin C and actually very tasty. And it's called Mindihi. But I also found that bramble is called Minbidehi, and thistle is called Minbidehi. So, you know, how to break down that word and how it translates. It's very interesting. And the orange leaf that was often, again, harvested for smoke mixes, and I use that for smoking, and it does help you breathe a little better. And the berries, again, loaded with vitamin C, and you can also dry them and use them as teas throughout the year. This is a painting I did of sumac in New York in my yard. There's actually a sumac leaf glued in there, the 3rd leaf on the right. And again, learn the winter or fall silhouette of a plant so that even without those bright leaves, you know that that's the medicine. And here's some sumac aid. And again, it's another plant that's very important to birds, animals, and flying insects, especially in winter. Sweet Sicily, Shange Mankan, or Shanga Mankan, horse medicine. And I know this from experience with my own horses. I found this more often on the East Coast, but if we were ever trail riding and this grew along the stream banks, I did all I could to keep my horse from going over and nibbling it. And the tribes here used to use it to rub in the nostrils of the horses to keep them long-winded, and before the horse races, it was very common. It's really sweet smelling. Sweetgrass, Peje Zonsta. This is my friend's yard, and the cat, from the cat forward is all sweetgrass, and behind the cat is sage. And I took 3 little plugs of plants from his yard, and I now have a circle of sweetgrass about 6 feet across. And it's just beautiful when you walk near it or by it, the smell. And then my friend Joe Badmoccasin, we braided sweetgrass at an event at the Indian Center, and he joked about how, oh, what if we just sat down on the earth and just braided it there, and then somebody walked by and say, oh, look at Mother's hair, it's all braided, somebody really took care of her here. So I went home to try that, and yeah, you can sit on the earth and braid right there on the earth. So I made some braids that way. And this was what I brought to the Indian Center for them all to braid. Wild columbine, Inublankide sabehi, Inublankide sabehi, Inublan, fragrant kide to make, to cause, sabe, black he plant, black perfume plant. This one, along with the bee balm, the nublan, were very popular with men as a perfume. And here it is growing in my yard. This is a wild version that's pink. This is more common, the red, as a wild version. And there's so many domesticated versions as well in many, many different colors. But these are edible flowers. They make salads beautiful. You can eat them as you're grazing in your garden. And of course, honeybees, hummingbirds, a lot of pollinators love them. And when you squish them, it's the seeds, the black seeds that were used to make perfumes, and men would often rub them on their wrists to attract their female partner. The wild plum, Annual Dhegiha, is very abundant near where I live also, and it's what I used to learn to make gojapi, and it was really delicious. As eating it off the bush, it's a little bit sometimes bitter and tart, but you put all that sugar or honey or however you make your gojapi, and it was just delicious. And this is just to give you scale. This is a small sunflower near a harvest of wild plums last year. Wajide, wajide, wild rose. This word also used for tomato. And wa is like the class of, or wasabe being like the black bear, those animals that are black, wajide, those plants that are red. And again, these flower petals are edible, and they make a really nice tea, but it doesn't last long. The vitamin C evaporates quite quickly, so when you make rose petal tea, you want to drink it right away. And it's also another plant that's very good for your skin and as a facial wash and as a perfume. And when you get to the hip stage, that's the medicine that you can dry and use later in the year. But again, because it's so loaded in vitamin C, you want to ingest it and use it right away before the vitamin C evaporates. And it's quite sour, but if you add a little bit of honey or sugar to your tea, it's really good. Willow is one of my favorite trees. It's spelled in some books with the GH, but I believe the sound is Dhegiha. Dhegiha. Blanche is the diamond willow. Dhegiha sagi is the hard willow. Dhegiha ushpan is the soft willow. Dhegiha the water willow. And in Nebraska, it's the black willow that grows most common. Most of us know the weeping willow, which was actually imported here, but it's a very peaceful tree. And this is what aspirin was derived from. The salicylic acid in willow is how pharmacists discovered to make aspirin. It's a pain reliever, good for headaches, good for external wounds, good for joint pain, good for arthritis. And my horses love to nibble the branches. It was also a very good horse farter, along with the cottonwood and other trees. They love to nibble the branches and buds when they're young. Yellow dock, Jonconcy, root, C, yellow. And this is another plant that first year it's just the rosette of leaves. It's very sour. Some people call it sourdock. And it's another one of those plants that you have to rinse and boil. Drain out the water, boil again, drain out the water. And this is another one of the plants that's very good for nettle sting. Besides the plantain, this often grows near nettles, and if you rub the leaf on the nettle sting or bug bite, it will help with the sting and alleviate the pain. And this is the seed stage in its early phase. And I like to show a close-up of it because it looks very much like the seeds of rhubarb. If any of you grow rhubarb and make pies, these plants are related, and their growth pattern and even the shape of their seeds is very, very similar. And again, it's another one that takes over our pastures. This is the seed when it turns brown. I harvest these. It's also related to buckwheat. And when I harvest a lot of this seed, I'll sew them up in pillows, and they make really nice form-fitting pillows that help you with neck aches and back aches. The seed and the plant and the root have the highest concentration of iron of any plant in North America. So it's the first medicine you go to for if you're anemic or a tired blood or in the spring to get your blood circulating. And here's the root. They call it yellow root because when you slice it open, it's yellow inside. There's another close-up of the root. And the last plant, yellow lotus, Tedawe. And when bananas were first introduced, the Omaha remarked that they looked very much like the root, so they called bananas Tedawe Tinawigo. And here's the yellow flower. And this is the root. I've never actually eaten. Does anybody here have experience with using this plant as food? The yellow lotus root? Chonkapin, yes. That's another name for it, yes. Chonkapin, yes. You've eaten it?
Yeah, it's one of our dishes.
Ah! I'd love to taste that someday. How do you prepare it? Soak it, yeah. Get the dirt out, scrub it with a toothbrush. And then you boil it, or
You put it in
with beef?
or I think even some people even do pork.
With pork? It's like starchy, like kind of the way you would use potatoes? Nice. So, and you are Kaw?
Osage.
Osage, so that's common. Wahaba, the corn, words for corn, most often I saw the word wahaba or wahabe. And also some of the Ponca taught me watanzi. Watanzi skide, sweet corn, wahaba ukading, Indian corn, watanzi ukading, Indian corn, told to me by Ponca Sylvester Bold Warrior. Wahaba katushi, hominy, wanahuche, popcorn, wahaba chtin, which I think that maybe is supposed to be a bee, wahaba bli, corn sores, blisters, or corn smut, and I'll show you a picture of that. This is on one of the trails near the Ponca Agency. They did a beautiful trail that goes around, and it starts near the agency building and goes around the old earth lodge they recreated and through plants and fruit trees that they planted and near the buffalo herd. And each one is educational. It's called an educational trail. If you ever get to visit the northern Ponca, it's really a good walk to take. And in Neely, Nebraska, it's almost over. The blue corn has been revitalized from seed over 140 years ago, and they plant it every year in the track of the pipeline. And it comes in blue, white, red is considered the sacred seed. Here it is at harvest, and this is all a heritage seed that in the path of the pipeline, they're trying to protect that land with the corn. The corn is standing against the pipeline for us. And the milkweed gives you a clue as to when it's time to harvest. The silk is also medicine. You can make a wonderful tea that's very good for urinary tract infections, for skin, for blood cleansing. And this is what the smut looks like, and when we're harvesting corn, most people tend to want to throw this away, and I have a bag and tell anyone who has smut, please give it to me, because this is another fungus that can be dried and used as medicine. But when it's fresh and white, boiled up or grilled, is delicious. And this was one of the past tribal council members at the harvest, Stephanie, and there's blue corn. And then they encourage us all to grow at home. So this is my garden at home with squash, corn, and beans, and sweetgrass. And this was the blue corn cobs that I harvested to plant in another year. And then in the flyer are different words for the parts of plants. And tache is in there as little flower buds. But now I'm going to add to it that it also just means little flower. Is that what you said, Glenda? Glenna? Yeah. And everything on the earth has a purpose, every disease, an herb to cure it, and every person a mission. This is the Indian theory of existence. Morning dove, Salish. Thank you.